Welcome to Aging Out or Growing Together, right? We really believe that it's a choice and that it's intentional work to choose the latter, right? Growing together. Flipping the youth service paradigm to better support youth and young adults. Today's session is really focusing on the work of building a network of support, co-creating alongside young adults and with other invested interests to build a loving, warm circle of support, network of care with others. And back to some words that were shared at our first panel that I think serve a wonderful bridge into today's conversation.
The needs of young people are the needs of all of us. There isn't too much of a difference. We all have a need for spaces that protect our intuition, spaces that cultivate and maintain a sense of belonging, that support us in reconnection to the natural world, and that support our connection to our cultural tools and our medicine that we use to sustain and heal ourselves. After our young people have survived school, I think we need to support them in healing from that, to return to the processes of their intuitive development. The time after that can be an incredible, lonely process when school has been the primary space where you connect with your peers in the sense of community. The sense of belonging is really vital. Dr. Tiffany Marie Johnson.
For some further reflection in your own experience, what value does belonging play in a young person's wellness? How have you personally created spaces of belonging in your work? And what barriers have you encountered? So Kriya Gomez is an Indigenous mother of 6 who believes in community-initiated solutions and the power of redemption, and has anchored her work in education, community organizing, youth development, juvenile and criminal justice values for more than 20 years. For the past 5 years, she has served as a member of the leadership team at the Young Women's Freedom Center, where she began her journey in community work as a youth more than 27 years ago. There, she supported the leadership development of systems-involved young women, gender nonconforming, and trans young adults. Valerie Slater leads the Rise for Youth Coalition and advocates for the rights of system-involved youth. Previously, Valerie was a juvenile justice attorney and legal aid justice center and a coordinator Rise efforts while she housed the Just Children program at LAJC. Valerie has also worked to project the rights of children with disabilities in community, residential, and juvenile justice facilities throughout the Commonwealth at the Disability Law Center of Virginia. Valerie earned her Juris Doctor from the University of Richmond School of Law and her Bachelor of Arts from the Colorado State University. Valerie has dedicated her life to work, advocacy work in its many forms to preserve and protect our most vulnerable resource, our youth.
My name is Kriya Gomez. I use she, her, they, them pronouns. And I'm currently serving as a strategic program advisor at a place called the Rosenberg Foundation. But my previous work, literally less than a year ago, and that continues, is that of working with young people. I actually co-founded a statewide coalition called the Sister Warriors Freedom Coalition. We're a statewide coalition across the state of California. We have 16 chapters. Our North Star is to end the incarceration of femme identifying folks in the state of California. We have folks from, to be a member of the coalition, you just have to be system involved and identify as femme. And this work has been really interesting. I've had a journey to where I'm at now. As a young person, I was system involved. My life changed when I found the Young Women's Freedom Center, formerly called the Street Survival Project, formerly called the Center for Young Women's Development. We're a national model of leadership development for young people. And there are so many things that I'm going to talk about that were really important about that. and continue to be important for the transitional age youth that we work with and we partner with to help them create a better quality of life for themselves. I also served as a teacher and a dean for many years and worked with middle school students who I will say really pushed me to be empathetic towards growth and development, and just that idea of belonging, and something that I think I want to focus when we talk, and that's that protection of intuition that was on that slide. That is actually really key, I believe, when working with transitional age youth. While at the center, I also led the campaign to close down San Francisco's Juvenile Hall, which we are in the process of doing. And that was actually done in collaboration with transitional age youth who had experienced the juvenile justice system and were harmed by it in San Francisco. And so it was such a powerful movement of both testimony and what we call at the Young Women's Freedom Center and the Sister Warrior Freedom Coalition is social biography, which is something that we teach young people to do as a point of reclaiming their story, as well as healing, knowing that these young people who had been harmed by the system, now we're closing it down. And it was a beautiful journey that I hope I get to talk a little bit about today.
Yes, I am a practicing criminal justice attorney exclusively for young people. I am the executive director of Rise for Youth, and Rise stands for Reinvest in Supportive Environments. And everything that we do is encouraging growth, development, the ability for young folks to dream and then realize those dreams. And for those young folks that haven't had the opportunity to realize that that's even something they should do, we want to create the space where they can realize that they can dream. Sometimes young folks that have lived in traumatic spaces or spaces that are unstable, they're so busy trying to survive that they forget that they can dream and visualize a future so much brighter than what they are experiencing in a current moment. I have also had my own encounters with the justice system, and I'm so grateful that there were folks who were loving and supporting that helped me make it out. And, and even as an attorney, I can look back at my journey towards becoming an attorney and being told by someone that my history was going to prevent me from becoming an attorney. And then fighting that battle and overcoming it. And I think back to all of the challenges and all of the hurdles that I overcame and the help and the supports that ensured I was able. And now I just pour my life out to ensure that I create the spaces that young folks can come into and they can make them their own. And they are able to then achieve their dreams. They can figure out what it is that they want to do, and then they can go for it and accomplish it. So proud of the work that we have done here in Virginia to assist with the closing of our largest youth prison, Beaumont Juvenile Correctional Center, which closed in 2017. We are working now on that last juvenile prison. It is Bonaire Juvenile Correctional Center, working to get that closed. And I want to shout out the great work that's happening in California, because we are using it as a model. We are attempting, so I'm going to be testifying in a committee meeting in a little bit, because we are attempting to, number one, establish a minimum age of jurisdiction in our JDR courts. Right now in Virginia, there is no minimum age. Any child can be prosecuted. And it's really frustrating that in Virginia, we have prosecuted 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, but we're also attempting to raise the maximum age. Right now, 17 is when JDR court jurisdiction ends, and we are working to extend that all the way up to 20. And so there's some great work that's already happened across the nation, and we're drawing on that work and calling our legislators to the carpet to say, you can do it here as well. It is promoting public safety. But the work that in California, you all have moved your your juvenile justice into the health secretary. That's another piece of legislation that we are working on, is to move our Department of Juvenile Justice into the health secretary. And we have launched a campaign, and it's called Redefine the Vital Signs. And it's all about taking a public health approach to public safety. And so I'm excited for the work that we've got going on and the way that we are able to support young people. We have our youth leaders, and we have a youth development academy, and all of those spaces are created so that young folks are able to talk about their needs. They can be the orchestrators of the solutions to the challenges that they're facing. And I'm excited and thankful to be a part of this conversation today.
I want to ask both of you, in your perspective, what are some of the unique experiences of transitional age young folks within these different systems?
In terms of transitional age youth and some of their unique experiences, so first I want to encourage folks to go to the Young Women's Freedom Center's website, youngwomenfree.org. We started in 2017 a Freedom Research Institute where young people were certified in participatory research and created an institute. And we do our own research at the Young Women's Freedom Center. And the reports that have come out are absolutely amazing. And there's one in particular called Through Our Eyes, and it was a report of young people who were under the age of 30 who had been part of the Young Women's Freedom Center as transitional age youth and younger. And there were some really common threads. And I do want to say that we're talking about femme identifying folks because this is the population that I worked with in particular. One is that many had experienced houselessness at least 11 times in their lives. So we're talking about young people who were homeless as as children with families, young people that were homeless as teenagers, that moved multiple times, that had bounced around to families' homes until they ultimately had no where else to go, and then were homeless as adults and sometimes homeless as transitional age parents, which I'll talk about later. The other thing is that they had experienced multiple systems. So many of them had experienced, the child welfare system as children. Unfortunately, I use the term, but graduated into the juvenile justice sector and foster care sector. They had been programmed beyond belief, meaning that since they were old enough to be prescribed programming and therapy, they had been programmed. They deeply mistrusted the system, and they deeply mistrusted many of the agencies that they were referred to by the system, and really felt like they were not included or seen as an intelligent individual who could participate in their case planning, which is where a lot of community-based organizations that focused on root causes was one of the things that lots of them highlighted needing and really appreciating. And San Francisco, I will say, the Bay Area is full of rich resources. But a lot of times young people would tell you, I went there and I was a number, or I went there and I was a case. And that the programs that worked most well for them are the ones that combine two things: cultural appreciation and culture exposure, and acknowledgement, and also worked on leadership development. So gave them the ability to go back and actually do something about the things that they felt had harmed them, empowered them to bump heads with the system in one way or another, and to push back. We did this and continue to do this through Sister Warriors, through testifying. Young people write legislation as Sister Warriors. Young people participate in advocacy. and young people participating, shutting down facilities. So those things really empowered young people, even while they were going through their circumstances and situations. It was something that kept them hopeful. We talked about belonging equaling hope, and that was the one way that that it really kept young people feeling part of something bigger than themselves, which created that hope that a lot of them felt they needed to keep going, even when things were not well in their personal lives.
Awesome. And, you know, I thank you for everything that you shared, Kriya. And I'm going to go in the other direction. We have seen the attempt to say young folks should be acting more adult sooner than they're even ready, right? That we are pushing them into spaces and demanding of them levels of maturity that they have just not yet attained. There is something to be said for allowing young folks to lead their transition and their growth and their development. But there is also something to be said about supporting them and recognizing that they're going to make mistakes. And that's a part of growth, and that those mistakes ought not be fatal, right? We ought not be throwing out the baby with the bathwater, if you will. As young folks really begin to, you know, get their feet on the ground and find their way, if they take 3 steps back, we ought to be right there to say, you know what, how about I hold your hand and we walk together for a while? And when you feel like it, let go of my hand and that'll be perfectly fine, right? We've got to stop criminalizing childhood and young adulthood and allow for, you know, that time period of, you know, that 20 to 25. We've got to allow all that happens within that time. We've got to give it grace, and we've got to be there to be supportive. Those are the things that we have learned. You know, I love what you were saying about allowing young folks to really be a part of making the change. We just the MLK weekend, we were in retreat with our young folks. And it was a lobby retreat. We were teaching them all about talking to legislators. We were going over the bills that they had helped to decide. These are the ways that we are going to be advocating this year, and even reviewing the bill drafts to say, oh, wait, this is a little going too far. We need to roll that back. And now here are these bills. Let's review them and let's come up with those top points that as we go and talk to legislators, that they are going to understand that this is the voice of the young folks talking about what they need, and that you're going to listen to them. And so we spent a weekend away with them. And then on Monday, MLK Day, we were at the legislature, and they were talking with their lawmakers. They were setting appointments for February when crossover happens. Those of you from the political arena, you know that first the bills have to be heard in one chamber, whether it be the Senate or the House of Delegates, but then they will have to cross over. Those that are still alive will cross over to the other chamber. So they spent some time talking about the bills and then set new appointments to go back after crossover to talk to other legislators. And so really making civically wise young folks, right? We've got to invite them into every space that we exist in, and then help them to be competent in those spaces. And once they become competent, then we just let them go. It doesn't mean that we just leave them in free fall if they make mistakes or if they are floundering. We're there to support, but it's a wonderful thing to see young folks kind of come into their own. So as systems have attempted to oftentimes just kind of squash or squeeze out of them their individuality or their creativity, we are trying to open those spaces back up, open those spaces in their minds back up, and create for them the opportunity to use the fullness of them. Now, systems in particular that have been, oh goodness, the least, I'm trying to be kind. That's what I'm trying to be kind. But there are systems, as we all know, that have not been the most conducive to growth and development for young folks, even though that's what they're tasked with. Isn't that something? That's your task, but yet you're failing. And so we also have to create the spaces where young folks are able to reset, to heal, as we were talking earlier, heal from system involvement, whether it is the foster systems, or whether it is, some of the health systems that just aren't providing all of the help and supports that young folks need. And so we're really excited to be able to come alongside and create space for young people to grow and be healthy.
Thank you. As you're sharing, I'm recalling some of my favorite scholars, Paulo Freire and Roderick Watt, Virgil Moorhead. They speak to the incredible power of critical consciousness and civic engagement, and how those are critical consciousness, really understanding the world you are situated within, how it operates, and how it might be set up against you, how that is an antidote for oppression, and how that is a incredible pathway towards healing, to take agency, to understand and take agency and power back from the systems. We need to see them and understand them first. And so thank you both for uplifting the ways in which you are engaged in that work with your transitional age young folks, and also acknowledging that it's a heavy burden, right? It's heavy to acknowledge the ways systems are designed, often not in our best interest and not in ways that support healing. I'd love to ask what experience you've had working across systems in service of young adults, and also where you have seen the most promising efforts in regards to cross-system building, communication, and growth.
So I want to go back to the social biographies that we help our members build. A social biography is really looking at yourself. What we say at Sister Warriors is seeing the context of the world in your life and seeing you in the context of the world. This is actually really important for young folks, especially young folks, for the most part, who have built skills that have allowed them to survive when they no longer qualify for services, right? Or their mistrust has caused them to not fully access services, right? And so a lot of times when they are engaged in the system, the level of defeat that they feel from having to navigate those systems can wear a person down and make a person, especially a young person, feel like all the things they're experiencing are their fault. And I say that because a lot of the times, right, we don't acknowledge that when you don't have access to basic things like IDs, you don't have access to a reliable source of food, whether or not young people have been raised with the skills to do the things that many, right, that we will ultimately have to learn how to do to be adults. Simple things like, balance a budget, or even do your laundry, right? We know that young people who have been on their own for some time find ways to do the things that they need to do. To me, this is part of that protection of intuition, is allowing for young people to know that we honor and we acknowledge that you do what you have to do to eat and survive every day, right? But the system will make you feel like those things, and when you get caught up in the system for doing those things, whether it be stealing food or boosting or whatever it is that you do to make sure that your ends meet, we know that is, and what we talk about often at Sister Warriors is that that's part of a bigger systemic issue. That's part of the impact of capitalism on our everyday lives, right? Social biographies are a tool that we create with young people to help them acknowledge that and to be able to talk about what's happening politically, contextually around them that's impacting their lives today. An example, in San Francisco, the wealth gap is so wide that, you know, we have places, single room occupancy hotels, where there are generations of families living in a small hotel room because it is impossible to find affordable housing in the Bay Area in San Francisco. So to be homeless is not something that is necessarily your fault, right? It's not your fault. Social biography allows for a young person to tell their story in a way that acknowledges these things. And this becomes important when young people have to continuously tell their story, or we have to look at what is being prescribed by the courts or a system to a young person, right? What are the conditions of their probation? What are the things that they need to know about what they're navigating, and how we talk about how they're navigating it to get the best outcomes for young people. So our social bios are something that we ask young people to submit to their probation officers, submit them to your social workers so that your social workers get context to your story. What often gets missed in these conversations is the why, right? Why are things this way for you right now? What are you navigating and why are you navigating it? And social bios really give context to that for a lot of folks. We start there because it's there that we can have an honest conversation about how we're going to advocate for a young person in the system, right? Then we can talk about what's the most priority. What's the priority for this young person? And for us, it's always housing first, right? It's always stability, economic stability. We love entry-level jobs, but for a Tay youth, that is not going to do it. We need a pipeline. We need to make sure that folks are really thinking about how they're sustaining young people who are at an age where, you know, Valerie had talked about, like, we don't honor developmentally that they're in this weird, really kind of odd place that if we think about when we were, you know, 19, 20, 21, you know, we were still thinking, for a lot of us, we were still thinking about how I can pay half of my PG&E bill and still go out tonight, right? And so we know that young people are navigating that with even less resources. And to have an entry-level job in a place like San Francisco or in a place like New York, right, just doesn't cut long-term planning for them. So these social bios are really important to us because they kind of do some of the introduction on how we want probation or a system to see the young person. It sets the tone for how we're going to push back on some of the language and things that they're prescribing to the young person or asking the young person to do. And it also helps empower a young person to talk about themselves, not as a victim, but as a survivor, which really changes the conversation and the way that that probation officers and you know, people in drug court and things like that see a young person. There's a sense of a level of respect that happens, and all of a sudden there's a level of autonomy that they can have in pushing back on those case plans and things. So I just think that it's really important for young people to not always feel at the beck and call of the things that they're required and mandated to do. It doesn't always feel good to feel like you're disempowered with every step that somebody is telling you is supposed to make you more successful, when, you know, you're looking at it and all you can see is, oh, my day is going to be filled with having to sit in an office or be part of a group that I don't think is really going to help me. Or unfortunately, and I'm going to say this, and I feel like this is a brave space to say it, but or go to therapy that I don't in this moment feel is useful to me because I'm not ready. And so, you know, it's important for young people to be able to push back on those things too, and to have advocates and adults that can help them with that as well.
Priya, thank you for all of that you have shared. And I just want to piggyback on much of it. You know, when I think of where I have seen promise, are there systems, are there things happening in Virginia that are promising in their approach to supporting young folks? And I have to say that it's in the grassroots, quite frankly. It is unfortunately, the failure of so many systems, the very things that you have lifted up, Priya, it is the failure of systems to be listening more than talking at young folks. They have particular ways that they do things. And you know what? This is the way it's done. And you're going to come in and you're going to fill out the paperwork. You're going to get in the line and you're going to, provide all of the paperwork, and we're going to put together a package of services. And then you're just going to go and you're going to do it. And if you're not successful, well, doggone, didn't you go through our little package? Right? And because that's unfortunately often the way systems work, it's grassroots organizations that have come to the aid of young folks where all of those gaps lie, where they need to be heard first, not told, here's a package, and once you give us all of this information, we're going to be able to figure out what you need. Rather, let's have a conversation. Let's hear what you're experiencing. And then you tell us what your needs are. Just because I have heard your story, just because you have told me what you've experienced, it still doesn't send me to my Rolodex of services to put together what I think will be most effective for you. When is it that I'm going to take the time to just be a listening ear? And that's where the grassroots organizations have really come to bear and fill in gaps. In a committee meeting just last week, I heard a legislator who was attempting, so the felony threshold for larceny here in Virginia is $1,000. It's only been that for 2 years. It was $500 2 years ago. This particular bill was to push it back to $500. And the legislator's reasoning was, folks are going to the grocery store. They are filling up grocery carts and walking out with them. And we've got to be able to prosecute these individuals as felons. How is it that you're saying that someone going to the grocery store and filling up a cart should be prosecuted as a felon? Why is not your first response, why are folks having to steal food? I mean, I pause because I'm hoping that everyone is hearing that and thinking to themselves, really? We want to criminalize folks for smaller amounts of money because people are stealing food? That it just doesn't make sense. And then, when we think about housing, how many of those folks that are stealing food are then trying to sell some of it so that they can pay the bill so that they can stay in their home if they have one? Right? Because when we are talking about our transitional age young folks, so many of them, they don't have credit. And so they aren't even able to get into that apartment. Right? And so it's unfortunate, but it's the grassroots organizations that are coming alongside these young folks and paying first, second, and even a third month's rent as a deposit so that young folks can even get into a place. And then we're trying to make sure that we can find for them the employment that they're going to be able to sustain that apartment once they're in it. Right? And again, it's grassroots organizations, unfortunately, that are coming to bear and filling in those gaps, because our DA kids, they're not equipped quite yet to take on all that we're attempting to say that they should. And, when we look at our systems, as we are attempting to get our juvenile justice system aligned under the Health and Human Resources Secretary, we're trying to signal a paradigm shift in the thoughts and the minds of the individuals who are then the judges, right? We need them to look at these young folks and see that they're still growing. We recognize that we have children and then we have adolescents, and then we have teens. We recognize that transition, right? We know that there is something in between, in the little ones and the teenagers that trying to head into that young adult. We know that adolescence is a time when they're a little more, their minds are more volatile, their bodies are more volatile because there's so much going on. We need to have that same thought when we are looking at teenagers, adults, and then those young adults in the middle, that once again, that volatility is not so much happening inside of them, it's happening all around them. The world is pushing in on them. The world is demanding so much more of them. And so when are we then, what systems are going to recognize, well, here we are, right? We are the ones who are recognizing that there is a distinct difference, and there is a distinct, that age group, they need greater support, not so much to press out of them their individuality or even their growth, but to come alongside them. And, again, the promising work, it's happening in communities. It's happening in places like CREA, what you're doing, and so many of you, the work that you're all doing, and Rise for Youth and what we're doing. We are the ones, right? And as we continue to sound the alarm and draw more in, if there is anyone on this call right now or this webinar right now, if that's not where you are, we're calling you in. Come on in, be a part of this, be one of those safe spaces, become the promising place where young folks are gathering all that they need, and then they have a toolbox, right? They can pull out, oh wait, this is where I can go if I need help with getting food. Oh, in my toolbox, here's where I can go if I need help filling out this rental application, and might even be able to get the money to help me get into that apartment. Here's where I can go to help find that job that is going to pay me a living wage. Minimum wage, I wish we do away with. Can I be honest? I'm so tired of hearing minimum wage. I want living wage to become the standard. Why can't we do that? There are countries in our internationally that do this, that pay a living wage so folks are able to, that pay for healthcare, that put all of these things together, and it's just considered the rights of their citizens, of the folks living in of the residents of their country. Come on, let's get it together.
This is the fire we need. These are the words we need. There's so much resonance in the chat with what you're both sharing. I believe that this is the work that folks here on our session today are already engaged in. And it's important to hear and to be affirmed in what it is we see and we feel and we know, just as it is for our transitional aged young folks as well, right? To be affirmed. And I heard both of you share again how important it is to just be witness, right? We do have a vantage point of understanding different systems and being able to identify solutions, but more so is it, can we be a witness? Can we walk alongside? Can we hold hand? Can we bear with them what it is they're feeling? And we started today's session speaking to how important it is to create a sense of belonging. And I heard, CREA, you mention, that therapy is not always what a young person might want or need. I, as a therapist, once was working with a young person who had a very elaborate story of his father. And I talked to my supervisor and she said, don't you interrupt that story. She said, he needs that story right now. And until he shows signs of being able to substitute it with something else to support him in his coping, don't you interrupt that story for him. Help him build it, in safe and responsible ways, and affirm what it is you hear him needing in that story. And so I think that is so important. And, today's theme is around partnership. And I'm wondering how we might, and maybe this can be the last question and a question for everyone in the panel, how can we build therapeutic spaces, feelings of therapeutic spaces, right? And healing spaces in our specific work. If we know so importantly it is to be witnessed, to be heard, to be given the space to settle into understanding what it is we're feeling, how might we, as a lawyer, right, as a drug court advocate, as a teacher or a counselor, how might we create those spaces and encourage other systems to value those spaces? What conversations might we engage in?
We don't get to declare that spaces are brave spaces or safe spaces. Young people get to declare that. And I know that the ways that they've asked us to do that, they've done it in a number of ways at agencies that I've worked in the past. One of the ways that we've done it is, and this is controversial for lots of folks, but we don't allow our space to, law enforcement, probation officers, social workers cannot meet in our space. It is a space for young people. It's a safe space for young people to come. The conversations that they have with us, we are mandated reporters, but we also know that we have to honor where young people are at, and we don't leave them there, right? Our job is to honor where young people are at and bring them up to where they need to be. And that can't always happen if everything that you feel is super anxiety induced and you constantly feel like you're having to watch your back. So, we invite young people into the space to decompress. We also have a space just for young people to sleep, and for them to meditate, and for them to just sit and, be with themselves. It's quiet, there's dim light. We've been really intentional about having pillows everywhere, and it's a space that we don't do any work in. It's simply their space in the office. Other things, it is, we are a leadership development. It is a leadership development organization, and young people do work there. And I want to say that a lot of times, and you've heard me even say it around honoring culture. And I want to say that goes beyond just exposure to culture. It's actually honoring their culture. There have been times when we've had young women, Black girls, come in and completely upset that they have let their therapist, their social worker know, their probation officer know, their caseworker know that they can't meet on a certain day, that it's not flexible and that it's set. And oftentimes, when I ask more questions about, well, what's going on, like, why aren't they honoring it? And what did you let them know, what's going on? I've had Black girls say, oh, I get my hair done that day, or I get my nails done that day. And a lot of adults have so many judgments of like, well, you're barely surviving. Why are you getting your nails and hair done? Because this is a way of wellness. This is the way of being seen. This is their way of feeling good, and it has to be honored. And I know that sounds really simple, but it's something that, like, right, we ask these things of ourselves. We ask for folks to not interrupt our time when we're, have to do things with our kids or to pick up our children. Well, this is one of those ways in which I think, we need to honor, and we create safe spaces, and we let folks know that we see you, and that we honor how you're taking care of yourself, right? And I really wanted to say that because in all of the years, that's the one thing that I'm just like, I just don't get it. I don't get how we don't honor young people's times in that way. But it is super important, and it means a lot to them. And I guarantee if you do it, that their level of trust with you shifts and it changes, and they want to partner with you, and they're willing to commit to their plan. Something else that we do to make spaces safe is incentive-based motivation. If a young person has a large goal and there's a hump they have a hard time getting over, sometimes it's just going to an office or researching the information. We don't mind incentivizing them to be able to get to that point, right? So if the goal is a driver's license, but they're so scared to walk into DMV, it's a conversation around what's holding them back to take the first step, and then it's incentivized so that they can actually do that. We do lots of things with our gift cards. That's one way that, you know, we should be using these little things that we get in order to support our folks versus, you know, handing them and dangling them as, you know, these things for meeting their appointments. It really, if you want young people to move to where they need to be, there we have to acknowledge those places where anxiety causes the friction or the obstacle for them to get over it.
I would love to be in this space longer. I want to honor our end time. Please come back where we will be uplifting the importance of culturally valued practices and the ways that has been transformative to healing work and creating a sense of belonging for transitional aged young people. There are other offerings that we would like to highlight as well that are also upcoming. And we're deeply grateful for your wisdom and words.